What's up, MMOHuts community? We got a chance to go into ArenaNet to check out the Heart of Thorns, the first ever Guild Wars 2 expansion. And now for a game that's been releasing content updates again and again and again, it must be a pretty big deal for them to suddenly slap expansion on one of these updates. So we're going to find out a little bit more about what's going on with the Revenant and everything else. First, can you introduce yourselves and what you do with the ArenaNet team?
Sure. I'm John Peters. I'm one of the game design leads for Heart of Thorns.
And I'm Matt Werfel. I'm also a game design lead on Heart of Thorns.
So for the experienced players, what is the main thing you think people are going to be pumped about going into this expansion? One key feature that you are really excited for?
I suspect specializations. They've all played their characters up to level 80. They all want new skills and new traits, and that's going to be one of the ways to get them. So for me, that's maybe the most exciting thing.
And for me, it's Masteries. I think Masteries represents our version of kind of a contextual progression. So we're not raising the level cap. We're not introducing a new tier of gear. You can continue to play. The whole space of the original game is still relevant to you. And Masteries lets us go into new regions and say, we're going to do awesome things, and we're going to give you access to a glider here, and we're going to give you access to mushrooms that allow you to jump on them and move to areas in the game space that you couldn't get to before. And that's all contextual and based on that region, and it gives you a chance to really change the way that you approach encounters in that region.
So on that note, it seems like there's a lot of things in this expansion where maybe your technology's improved or whatever, where you're basically able to do what you wanted to do with the game originally. Can you talk about some of the areas that you've basically been set free now?
Yeah, I mean, so Guild Hall's a big one. That's one of the big things now. Instead of just having a UI that is your guild's progression, there's going to be an entire map that your guild gets to build and work towards. I mean, Matt, do you want to talk about some of the others, or I can? But
yeah. So there's even from little things like, hey, we weren't able to get your player character to talk in the open world before, and it's like now we can do that, and it opens up a ton of space, and players that have been around have given us feedback where they're like, whoa, I'm talking, that's really cool. Like, that's a very small thing, but that's one example of new tech that we're getting. If you look at the Revenant profession, that's where you see a huge amount of new tech coming in with new skills that we can use. You can summon hammers that swirl around you and do damage to enemies and actually are actually projectiles in the game code, and so they function as projectiles. New shapes, new abilities, the ability to, any one of the Revenant skills, if you look at it and you're able to kind of move through the mists and interact with the game world in a very different way. There's just so much new tech coming in. It's really exciting for us to build stuff and have players come and give feedback on it.
yeah, I would say too that from the outset, Guild Wars 2 was meant to be a very, very social MMO. We're making an online game. Players are playing together, so we should make sure that we, in every way, encourage them to do so. So there's a lot of systems like the changes to the Defiant system to make it more about players working together instead of just eventually wearing down these bosses. They actually have to coordinate. And so there's a lot of things like that just kind of take all those goals, like the main principles, and kind of bring them back in as strong a way as we can.
So I'm sure the theory crafters are already going nuts considering what this class is going to be capable of. In terms of PvE and in terms of PvP, how do you see them fitting into the current metas of the game? How are they going to interact with the other characters?
All right, so they're definitely, I think, among the heavy armor guys at least, I think the Warriors are generally the most tanky. The Guardians are generally the most supporty, and Revenants, I think, are going to tend to be in the more like just out of control, like really go aggro mode. But at the same time, every profession is pretty flexible, and again, without explaining to you what is happening with specializations, since the meta is going to be changing so much with that, you're going to find that like the Revenant is just going to fit like right into that whole mix because we're making that decision at the same time, and so all these things are going to get worked and balanced together. So,
anything to add to that?
I think definitely when you see some of even the encounters that we have in this demo, like the Wyvern encounter, a lot of the things that the Revenant can do, they can lay down a road that makes stability stacks for all of your allies in that region. And so they're able to really fluidly move between kind of support and damage roles. And so you can see in the demo when you go up into that Wyvern fight, like groups of Revenants will get together and will start to coordinate as that fight progresses, and you have to move from DPS to control to support. They're swapping around on the fly, and you can do that with almost all the professions, but I think the Revenant, because of its profession mechanic, will be particularly adept at swapping to fill multiple roles within a single fight.
Fantastic. Is there any other parts we should look forward to? How long before we get to hear about the dungeons and whatnot going in? Or I hear you're going to have some open world focus that had been instanced before.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Two things. One, we've shown a lot of videos, and there's this weird like challenging group content line that shows up in every one of the videos, and everyone's like, "What is that?" And like, there will be times, obviously, before we release where we'll talk about like what that really means for us, and so. We can't talk about what it is now, but that's sort of the idea. Is like we know that from a like I've played the game for a long time standpoint. I can keep playing PvP. The players are getting better. I'm getting better. That exists in World v World 2, where things are always shifting. In PvE, we need to create a place like that too, where players can feel like their mastery of how to play the game is being challenged.
Anything else?
Yeah, and I think one other thing that we didn't really talk about too much here, but we've got a whole new game mode coming in for PvP, the Stronghold game type, and that is a game type. It's not just a single map, and so we're introducing a new type of game, and we'll eventually be adding to that additionally. There's more things that we're doing for World versus World as well. We've got a new Borderlands map, and we'll be getting into some of the details very shortly about what the changes for World v World are. But across the entire game, we're updating systems, we're adding new things, and we're really focused on laying the groundwork for where is Guild Wars 2 going in the future, and so all of those systems being really integrated and really extensible is important to us.
So how soon can we get into the game and play Heart of Thorns?
When it's ready.
You can sign up right now on guildwars2.com to try and be in the betas, and like we'll start to have betas coming pretty soon, and the game's obviously we're playing it here, so we're getting pretty close to that, and we're pretty excited. Hopefully you guys are as excited as we are.
All right, guys, thank you very much for the interview. I'm very pumped for this.
Awesome.